Okay, it's been a long time since we brought a fantastic writer, author, scholar, thinker to you. And on Book Chat today, we have Professor Tade Akin Aina. He's somebody I've known like all my life, and trying to find a bio that would do justice was quite like pulling tooth because, I mean, what do you say about a pan-Africanist, a sociologist, an activist, a scholar who has lived in various cultural hubs? He's lived in Cairo, Dakar, Lagos, Nairobi, New York, and Sussex. From 1993 to 1998, he served as Deputy Executive Secretary Publications at Codestra. And Codestra is the Council for Development of Social Science Research in Africa. He was based then in Dakar, where he played a pivotal role in advancing social science research across Africa. His scholarly work span urban studies, and I remember at Unilag in those days when he used to go to, I think it was Makoko, and he did a lot of work in Makoko and had a lot of publications. He's also interested in governance, philanthropy, higher education transformation, and God rest his soul, Pius was one of the beneficiaries of that higher institution transformation that they had a series of interventions in Ghana and in Nigeria. And social policy. How would I talk about social policy without talking about how I met this great man? He was an executive board member of the Nigerian Environmental Study and Action Team. And I think the onset process in 1992, he was very much involved in it. But from 1998 to 2008, he was with the Ford Foundation, and he had multiple leadership roles at the Ford Foundation office in Nairobi. He was acting representative in Cairo 2001 to 2002, and later regional representative for East Africa from 2003 to 2008. He also was in Carnegie Corporation of New York. Look, I can go on with all the places he's been and all the things he's done, but much more than anything he's done, no, this writer is a scholar, a first-class scholar. And I know that because I worked with him, and that is not being biased at all. It is just speaking the truth. Dr. Tade Akin Aina, you're welcome to Book Chat, and we hope we would have a very interesting conversation about the book that has been out, The Wanderer's Waves, and it's a collection of poems by Professor Tade Aina. Yeah. So, like I said, you're welcome to the program, Prof.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Now, the usual way I start is that for every book, there is always a story. There's a reason why you decided, from the little I've said, from how people insisted that you published this book. So what inspired you to title the collection, The Wanderer's Waves? Some may want to know whether it reflects your personal journey across all of these places you have been, or is it a metaphor for something broader? You have the floor, Prof.
This is interesting because it crisscrosses or intersects many parts of what I'll call my being. It is an opportunity to capture elements of part of my political journey. It's an opportunity to capture who am I as an African in terms of places and spaces. It's also an opportunity to capture a spiritual element of oneself. And poetry challenges you in many ways because it's not a long, the essence that you capture might be, and Kole, you also did amazing things with photography. And we don't live in a world of stills now. We live in a world of motion. more cinematography, videography rather than photography. But that the still photograph is like a painting on the wall.
Mm.
And the more you look at it, if the photographer is an artist like yourself, the more you look at it, between the shades of color and light, between the background, objects, intentionally placed or inadvertently discovered. That is how I see every poem. So when I write about Dakar, in a place I lived in for 5 years and I love so much, a lot of things come to mind. Or I write about Kampala. And in one of the reviewers of this collection actually told me that there's also a sensuousness in some of the writing of the poems. And it is a sensuousness that you are denied in a much more abstracted, uh, almost barren academic writing.
Mm.
So the poetry captured and it's something that I played with. The person who actually, a couple of people uh, 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 have challenged me over this, doing a collection of poems. From those who knew me as a student at the University of Lagos and knew that I was always at poetry readings with my own little snatches. As I think Cyril Obi will remember, and the Professor Sky, I'm trying Omoni. If you remember Sky Omoni, the late
Yes,
poet.
yes, I
He,
do.
and the late Rotimi Johnson from Lasso, who was also a poet, actually did a Phillips recording of some
Mm.
of our poems at that time. So there have been that. But for me, it's been my secret side. And people demanded that I bring this to light. First, and it's not something that is like a one-off because a poem could spend 2 months in gestation,
Mm.
an idea, a syntax here, a syntax there, a verse here, a verse there. But they all do what you do. First, what did you capture in that particular moment? Then
Mm.
second, what fills it with blood, muscles, nerves, and a heart?
Mm.
What makes the difference? And that is the license. And I use the word license not in terms of a licentiousness,
Mm.
but it's like a permit to explore because license as word is both a permit and an absence of restraint. But
Mm.
in this case, it's a permission to say, open up this wall, crack this wall. I have a second collection now, which is much more intentional than this first collection coming. So the Wanderer's Waves, what has determined my life? It's a wandering in many ways, in physically and in spirit. People have always found it difficult for me, particularly in terms of religion and metaphysics, because for me, it's always the immense transitions between the spiritual symbolic essence
Mm.
of being a Yoruba man born and bred in Lagos, where we are the children of many gods, where polytheism reigns, yet the polytheism does not really uh, clear the supreme God.
Mm. Mm.
So,
Well,
so this is
but,
what it
well,
is.
yes, I can see where this is. So I want to bring you um, to some of the themes that I noticed in the work, and there are times that I've always seen you as a very devout Catholic, and at the same time, somebody who lived in Campus Square in Lagos and has connection with the essence and the cultural essence of places like that. But your poems draw from post-colonial, Renaissance, and modernist traditions. How did you weave these diverse influences into a coherent poetic voice?
It's the polyvalent and polymorphist nature of our being and essence. You know, we cannot be frozen. Let's into just one entity because that denies the liveliness and the heritage of our being. I am the scion of people on my mother's side who were taken as Hausa slaves to Brazil. Hausa Muslim slaves converted to Catholicism, returned to Pupu Aguda, and became Yoruba. So where, if you discover the essence of that journey, where is the meaning of trying to freeze me into a Yoruba being or a Hausa being or a return or the scion of returning slaves or the children of a particular tradition in Lagos Island where we have our own masquerade, we have our own Egungun, Ajishebi Again, that's interesting because it then leads to, and these are things, Colin, that I'm now beginning to explore more than all the things that we have done in the classrooms and talked. And I talked to Professor Lukmono quite a lot. We were talking the other day about the fact that at one point there were more than 1,800 shrines of Ishu in Lagos alone. And what did Ishu mean to the Yoruba? It is not Satan. Ishu is not a satanic. And what does that mean in the pantheon of the gods? And what does that symbolize in the making and unmaking and ever remaking of our personality? So actually, the Wanderer's Waves is actually a resistance to any attempt to mold one into a singular identity and singular being.
Well, for those of us who know, and just for the benefit of our listeners who might not know Professor Jacob Olukpan of Harvard, who's done a lot of work in religious studies and who constantly goes back to University of Ife to hold workshops. Those who want to know more about him can always look him up. But one thing I have always known about you, sir, is the fact that you love to travel. Travel seems to be a dominant theme in your work. How do geography and movement shape the emotional and the intellectual tone of this very collection?
Yes, every city, every place has its pulse. It's almost like a spiritual communion. And in two of the poems, I lived in Cairo, you will see examples of it in places I've been. And another poem, in one of the poems in particular, not the one around time, the one I call Places. The one I call Places. I actually, when I lived in Cairo, and I looked at the current day prejudices at that time when I lived in Cairo, being a Black man from sub-Saharan Africa, even though occupying a significant position in philanthropy, was a difficult experience for me. But my reaction to that was not just because of the current presence, that particular current presence, but it was as if I heard endlessly the howling and the calling and the pain of thousands of ghosts over thousands of years under the ground, locked in the pyramids and locked in the sands of that city. So the people in that city today might claim a particular kind of fundamentalist religious position. But yet for me, I kept hearing, a place-based, I actually relate to places with the totality of my being. I could love or hate the place from my first engagement, from the way I smell the place. I feel the place, I feel the air. And then I take a particular interest in its history. And then what kind of freedoms? And I love freedoms, again, not in a licentious way, but in a way in which I want all of us to be able to claim our free will and our individuality, to be able to roam in our imagination and our physicality. So I could feel that. And I could feel a place that has molded itself, constructed its own landscape to try to redefine or repress my free will. And my free will does not have to be my individuality, because my
Mm,
free will is a collective will at times I
mm,
carry with me. Like in Cairo, there were times I was called Abdi.
mm,
And it's funny, Abdi means slave in Arabic.
mm.
And you cannot impose on me in the 2000 an Abdiness for whatever it was worth, because of the place that I came from and the place that my ancestors have been. It's like my grandmother used to say, you meet somebody at Ido, you don't know whether he's coming from Kutuwenji. And
Mhm,
you start trying to analyze the person from the encounter at Ido. These
mm.
are like Yoruba, it's in Yoruba. In those days, the colonial presence geography of Nigeria. So you are
Yes.
coming by rail, but you have traveled thousands of miles by rail. Then they see you walking from Ido to Ota, and they think you are coming from Agege.
Not all those who wander are lost, is what I have been told around here.
Mm.
And Prof, you're talking about the Cairo on page 32 and
Yes.
of your collection. And would you mind reading just the first paragraph of page 32 so that my next question follows after what you've just said. I mean, and your perspective from Cape to Cairo, how you're seeing. And I know that you're a pan-Africanist, but when you finish reading this, I would like to find out from you what pan-Africanism means and how, as a sociologist, all of this is captured in your work. But first, let's do that first paragraph of page 32.
I have in my heart many times tried to truly return to this gilded city of noise, beauty, guilt, history, and imperial arrogance, where trapped noble ancient spirits denied their true selves for centuries in sealed concrete tombs, finding no rest 7,000 years later, scream fiery protests across ages, times, and places. To pretender royal heirs of races, cultures, blended creed, whose rule history rewrite, pervert, drench, and recolor in diverse martial relayering and remembered in adulation to often cruel conquerors across ages.
Well, I mean, that says a lot. And then you've given a very good explanation of how you were received by Cairo and how Cairo received you as well. But what I want you to do for me now is, I mean, I have known and I can attest to your Pan-Africanist credentials, more so the places you have lived and visited and worked and the interventions you've done, even as a sociologist. How do your academic and activist identities influence your poetic expression?
The history, the knowledge, the traditions, the curiosity about, as you know now, many of when we were much younger, we thought you
Mm.
just sit down and write a novel, or you just sit down and write a play. And as you know, the amount of research that it takes, when you watch Olarutimi Kunrumi, the
Mhm.
amount of research that went into that play, even though there's the artistic imagination later that shapes its presentation.
Mm.
And that's where it comes. I loved history. I still love history. And I love what I call subliminal underlying narratives,
Mm.
the history, the emotions behind. And I have always believed Cairo to be part of an African reality.
Mm.
But I lived in Cairo at a particular time where there was a tension. It was
Mm.
almost schizophrenic. The tension between being African and at times being Arab, and at
Mm.
times being Mediterranean, and at times carrying the prejudices of those who will reject us and embodying that under the lenses of an inherited religion. Because if we then go down to religions, Cairo and Egypt have remained crossroads of religions.
Mm-hmm.
When the origin of Christianity came, the first place of refuge was there.
Mm-hmm.
When the movement from Judaism, the great Exodus, was from there.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the rise of the non-Western Christianity, the first transition or crossing was to that place. It wasn't to Corinth. Corinth was later, to the Roman sector, to the Latin sector. The first movement was east. So in many places, it is the seed of where we are and who we are.
Mm.
And it is the collection, it is a center of collection of the plurality of racial development.
Mm.
The Nubian kings, there's a history. Even the pyramids, some of the figures there, the noses were broken. So
Mm-hmm.
they do not reflect anything that has any connection with my own identity.
Mm.
But that was made more in terms of a different kind of connection at the time I was there,
Mm.
fed by religion,
Mm.
seeing me as a non-believer of a particular dominant creed. That was again another creed that was imported into that same region.
Mm. Mm.
I have always had from childhood a strong bond with Cairo. And historically, when you looked at the histories of decolonization and you saw the contributions of Nasser to Nkrumah and Nkrumah marrying an Egyptian, and
Mm-hmm.
what Cairo was for us, it was almost like a site of pilgrimage.
Yes.
When I went to Cairo, often as a traveler, it was okay. But when I went as a resident, the transformation was significant.
Mm.
One of my first philanthropic gestures as a grant maker was in what I call media arts and culture, working with one of my colleagues to try to connect the Cairo Jazz Club with the work being done by Thiosan in Dakar,
Mm.
the Yusundo. And I think we made that grant between the Cairo Jazz Club and Yusundo's club in Dakar in
Mm.
terms of, just the connections around drums and the exchange of drums as an instrument of bonding.
Mm. Mm. Well, I don't want to go into that politics of the times of Boutros Boutros-Ghali when it is said that people from the northern part of Africa are Africans when there is something for Africa, and then when it is time to vote for things that affect the Arabs, they are Arabs. I have had a whole load about all of that and how um, many Africans don't feel very welcome. But in recent times, especially in the African Union, you get to see that the North Africans are being pulled into positions of authority just so that they can feel a part of the African continent. But Prof, let me just digress a little bit because you mentioned something about Christianity. Are you one of those who believe that Christianity is not a Western religion, but that Africa has a big role to play in the initial days of what eventually became Christianity? Or are you of the opinion that it was Judaism or the Jews that are the ones that we have to credit for the connection between Africa, especially Cairo, Egypt, with Christianity? Where do you stand on this matter?
I don't stand in the way you have framed it. I believe actually that Africans should never be ashamed of being Christians.
Mm.
Because Christianity was the faith of the Gentiles.
Mm.
Christianity was a wanderer's religion.
Mm.
Just like you saw this, the wanderer's waves.
Mm.
The first crossover was not to the West, it was to the Orient. If you go back to the Acts of the Apostles,
Mm.
the movement was to Alexandria and to
Mm.
Egypt.
Mm.
Before St. Paul took the movement to Corinth and to Macedonia.
Mm.
And don't forget, there was also the movement to Abyssinia. So Africans owned Christianity as much as anybody owned it.
Mm.
Christianity was the religion of the migrants. It was the religion of the refugees
Mm.
before it became an imperial religion.
Mm.
And the founding father of Christianity demonstrated his imperial kingdom was not of this earth. It was of a different place. He
Mm.
rode donkeys, not private jets. And he was forced to wear a purple robe, not the gilded, suits and all of those things that you see today. If we were to follow the true essence of Christianity, it belonged to Africa as much as it belonged to several other parts of the world that tried to reimagine Christianity.
Mm.
Every 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 bowing to Christianity was a process of spiritual reimagination.
Mm.
From Methodism to Anglican to Mormonism to Quakerism to Lutheranism to the Alabdura faith. Every engagement with that message was an engagement of spiritual reimagination in the whole process of making and remaking of meaning and destiny.
Prof,
Mm.
I hope that I'm not reading too much into your explanation that you also believe in a socialist Jesus, or am I just reading too much?
I won't call him the socialist Jesus. I will call him the Jesus of justice
Hmm.
and the Jesus of compassion. It was the Jesus of justice who said, "He who had no sin throw the first stone."
Hmm.
It was the Jesus of compassion who was the Good Samaritan. It was the Jesus of pluralism who had fishermen,
Hmm.
tax collectors,
Hmm.
doctors as part of his apostles, and the women, the Marys, and the Marthas.
Hmm. A very inclusive Jesus, you would say,
Very
of
inclusive Jesus.
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
I agree with you, and I hope we're not too controversial here. But let me return because there is a lot more to unpack when it comes to the Jesus and the portrayal in the West of Jesus. Some of the readers of your poems say you explore belonging and displacement. Do you see yourself as a physical wanderer, a spiritual wanderer, or even an intellectual wanderer? Or is this a universal condition you're trying to capture?
I think I am all of that, but I am not the only one. I put voice, as at times people wonder, again, as an artist, when you take a portrait,
Mm,
you might actually take a significant portrait of two people with a different kind of tenderness and love, looking at each other's eyes, which dominant aspects of certain societies do not accept. You capture that, but you are not of that sexuality,
mm,
but you capture that. And if your heart and soul goes out to your creativity, you will capture that tenderness.
mm,
You will capture that mutual respect. You will capture the human essence. And so I think wondering, right from even, we started now with the biblical base, but it's not only the biblical base. Oduduwa was a migrant
mm-hmm.
who found refuge in Oyo and from there built great things. Exodus in the Bible is another example of that. Every collective, every nation is a product of movements of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Bob Marley collects with us.
Yes,
Movement of Jah
movement of
people.
Jah people.
It's a collective. Whatever we see in the world today, the history of humanity is the history of great and not so great migrations.
Mm, mm,
And some of it, most of it is transformative, but some of it has a cruelty in it, in its transformation, that only ends up solidifying the collective nature of those who finally conquered, not the solidarity of our human beingness.
mm, mm. Well, I mean, I hope that those who watch this episode would be able to grab a copy of The Wanderer's Waves by Tade Aina. Let's talk a little bit about your language before we wrap it up. And your language, as it is said, oscillates between the lyrical and the philosophical. How do you decide when a poem should sound intimate versus when it should carry an intellectual weight? I mean, for people like us, we know you as a very grounded intellectual. And we're not talking about, we've not brought in the environment at all, but maybe we will at another time. But talk to us about your language and the choice of language that you use.
I'm glad it is you, because I there's a there are two elements in creativity.
Mm-hmm.
There is the impulse, the spontaneity.
Mm,
Like maybe you are, I go back to my Yoruba, like you've swallowed something that you must bring out. You must either deliver like a pregnancy or spit out. That
mm,
is the first urge that pushes you. And then later on, you discipline it with the craft and the art. But for me, this is what poetry is. I am traveling in a car. I run into an experience. I am in trouble. I can't stop until I find a piece of paper and pen.
mm,
I'm not very good at writing on my phone, but thank God for my iPad. At least I
mm,
can write on my iPad the first series.
mm,
And then at times it intersects with my own origin, my own language, the things that I grew up with. Ẹni máa kú pàdé ẹni máa pa.
Benny.
I see that, and I have to, and that comes in because that is the picture that I had seen that has pushed me. I'm looking at a street corner somewhere in Atlanta, and I'm looking or in South Africa, and I'm looking at people doing drugs, the peddler and the purchaser. And I'm looking at what that is playing in terms of the cultivation or the imposition of need and the profiting from need. And yet the satiation of that need is the only reality for that person. And what strikes me is like any makutik by the any mapa. He who will die has met he who will kill him. And but that comes to me again as a gift of who I am, just like a gift of who you are, the idiom with which that is expressed. So this is the creative process for me. It starts first with a few set of lines that just hits me from nowhere. Then I must harvest those lines. Then I begin to discipline those lines in revisions and reiterations. At times when I don't get a chance to even write, I try to memorize, I repeat. It becomes like a chant. And then interestingly, at times, some of it actually covers because again, one is influenced by the various things that one has read. You know, let me say on page 117, Dance and Trance. And that actually is almost the way, if you look at the very first one, Dervish Spirit, the Dervish, that's an Islamic spiritual group. Down far, this far south, it was always something of the Sahel or of the north. In colorful trance, I swear. Just like the Shango dancer will swear. And the Shango dancer wears a skirt, an expression of androgyny, skirt and braid, singer of songs, Jeremiah's ears. If you look at that, Islam, Christianity, our own indigenous religion, then I had been reading and I swear that day, the Polish poet who writes in barebone verse. To Anaswear's barebone verse I swoon, transcendental lyrics, mind and body charmed, luminous songs, everlasting vibes that enchant. Choruses drum from paddles that drill Okara's rivers. Gabriel Okara, our own mangrove delta rivers.
Piano and drums.
Yes. Beats that string Gibran's Khaled Gibran Desert to Rumi's Orient. Okigbo's sacred forest shrines to Blake's spirit. There's a connection between Blake and Okigbo. Songs that dissolve icy fear, unlock guarded cages, and release all from comfortable dungeons. Shining light on leaders who cast dark shadows. I am back to our context today, to our political leaders, our military leaders. Verses that duel modern political shamans, shame and dare spinners of our economic clouds and storms. That's a good example of the creative process. Those last beats, the last verses, were the context in which I was writing. The dreams or the trance. And it's like a trance. Occasionally, you'll see that in the Aladura church. What do you see? What do you see? I see. I see. The light shining, the sun, the fire. Exactly. It's a poetic moment. Also a transcendental moment. But to be able to be shared with other people, it must be harvested and captured and made available.
Well, you already took the wind off my sail because I was going to ask you if you were going to pick one poem in the Wondrous Waves, that best represents your worldview? And I think to a great extent, this last poem you chose might represent that. Um, why did you choose it is very obvious that it speaks a lot to all the readings or some of the readings that you have done, leaving those names as symbols that represent a larger thing within the text. But let me do what it's impossible for parents to do, to be asked publicly, who is your favorite child? You know, in this case, uh, which will be your favorite poem in this collection,
Hmm.
and
And
why? I know
you
that's a very tough one because I mean these are all in fact your intellectual children. Now to now publicly declare which one you would choose and direct attention to, will be a difficult one. But I hope you would be up to it.
you know now I have lived more than 6 decades on this glorious earth.
Hmm.
And it's you, people like you and I have made a choosing vocation. And every time we are in the places like Nigeria or even the United States or England, at times people want to make us question why we have chosen one path or the other. If you look at page 17, the Village Minstrel, it's a very personal poem.
Mm-hmm.
The Village Minstrel. If Akinwumi, and that's my name, had been a king, he will wear beaded crowns and gilded sandals, dangle fly whisk of impostor authority, decrease dripping fetid drivels from his gold-toothed royal lips. But he's only a village minstrel, rendering lost lyrics of our forsaken being. If Omo Orosun, Aina Omo Orosun, if Omo Orosun had
Mm.
been a general, he will wear starched khaki suits, carry swagger stick, adorn his spineless cap with fake medals, tight leather belts with silver buckles on cynical bloated punch. But he's only a village crier, inspired by Mother Idoto's bat. Huge talking drum, never shutting up, never silenced. If Akesoji had been a politician, big government minister, he would wear stiff agbada, beaded staff, coral beads, and dazzling gold chains, travel in jets, limousines, Hummers bumping off potholes dug for losers and lumping unfortunates on decrepit village roads. But he's only a local school teacher, frayed colors, sewing hats with wisdom seeds and parables. If only Aremu, Oriki Miniye, if
Mm.
only Aremu, and that's my Oriki,
Okay.
had been a bishop, he would wear snow white cassock, purple silk vest, Savile rose suits, carry pearl rosary, gold-plated scepter, gold ring adorned, perched in graceful surveillance of diocesan plenty amid neglected ones of dejected faithful. But he's only an urban slum Jeremiah, here to his Isaiah, endlessly lamenting as our people tell beads of sorrows. Atinuke's son, that's my mother's name, is no
Mm.
two-faced ruler. Akinbade's Kion is neither a purple-voiced bishop nor tussle-belted general. He's no fork-tongued politician, sibling to pen thief banker, converting the poor widow's mite to profit, tithes, and bribes, flying in private jets to redemption and paradise on earth. He's only the village jester, market square drummer, town crier who sees more than he looks and hears more than is said.
Mm. Mm. So why would you choose this one that speaks to the personal, or is it because the personal is also political?
The personal is the political, is the cultural, is the thing that we are struggling. Thank God there's been a really great revival in African literature. Colin, 2 generations after us, 3 generations after us, every young man is writing great poetry. Now, lots of new poets, new novelists, both diaspora and at home. Maybe because somehow the digital economy has created a new role known as content creator. Content creation gives lyricism, gives literature, gives images, gives sounds and verses a new posture in the world we live in. There was a time you were condemned to poverty. There was a time you were condemned to not being recognized. You are the photographer who they invite to the party, the wedding, then they carry you to the corner and give you, they even forget to serve you.
Many times.
Yes. But now it is changing. Interesting. It shows how times change. It shows how moments move and we only wander through them. That's why I chose that, because that particular kind of content creator, the artist, was never respected. Now there's a big hula baloo in the nature of Christianity in Nigeria today. If you follow all the noise about prosperity, whatever. Before, you and I, dressed in these shirts of ours, dressed in these caps of ours, we are poor people. We no gather, or we're eccentrics, you know? But now this content creation has actually redeemed the nature of creative content. And I chose that because at a particular moment when I wrote that poem, the intellectual, the creative mind was no longer the respected personality in our society. Everybody wanted to do their 419 or to do something or to own business.
Well, like they say, looking back is the gold of a wanderer. Looking back is the compass of a traveler. Now, if you were going to look back, what do you hope readers, I mean, especially those younger folks, the content creators you talked about, the OAP, the on-air personalities and stuff, these younger Africans from Durban to Joburg to Dakar to Isaleko to Pukwaguda and all of those people, what takeaway do you want them to arm themselves with in this collection?
One, the number one takeaway is don't stop being creative. I actually, when I read this now, I look at some of my grammar and punctuation, and I said I could have done better, but that had to be done. It can be revised. Don't never give up the creativity. But the second one, do the homework. If you're going to tell our stories, please pay attention. Don't tell our stories in a superficial way that denies our history, that denies the totality of our being. We are complex beings like anybody else. Our stories are subtle. They're complex. They're deep. Never forget the depths and the profound nature of who we are. And never stop creating hope in the midst of the despair, the despondence, the betrayal, the generational betrayal. The plunder, the theft, and pillage will always come the opportunity for new imagination and recreation. Don't ever give up hope on the fact that a better world is possible. That is where you and I, you remember many years ago, they were talking about the Davos and the economic development, the social development movement, you remember?
Yes.
Yes, the social summits. It was another world is possible. Another world is always possible. And that's why we always think of paradise, because of the inevitability and yet the distance and yet the necessary industry for the arrival at another world. And that's why we are wanderers.
Mm. Yes, another world is possible. And what I would also say is that another episode of Book Chat with Professor Tade Akin Aina is possible. What I should have done at the beginning of this program is to have dedicated this program to Auntie Ebam. I cannot finish this without recognizing her role, her inspiration, and everything she stands for till today. So this particular episode is dedicated to Auntie Ebam, who is the wife of Professor Tade Akin Aina. What else can I say than to give a big thank you to Prof for finding the time to come on this program and taking us through some of the nitty-gritty of his collection. All that you can do as a viewer of this is to go out there, go on Amazon, buy yourself a copy, read, and let's have a conversation like we usually do. Like I say, going away is not the prize of a presenter, because my voice would always remain with you. This program would always be there. So as I look back and I look forward and I look inwards, I know that there are people that surround me, and we say in Yoruba, "Eniyan lasho mi." I would never be naked. I will never be without, because I have people that surround me like Professor Tade Akin Aina. So on behalf of all the listeners, I want to say a big thank you to Prof for coming on the program. And we will be, again, we'll bring another writer, or even lure him to come for a part 2 of this program. Thank you very much, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.